had always loved hiking alone. There was something about leaving the city behind, about the rhythm of boots on dirt and the quiet of a trail that felt sacred. I wasn't reckless. I had hiked hundreds of miles over the years, always prepared. Water, snacks, first aid, phone, compass, small knife, everything I might need. I liked the solitude. It gave me control, a sense that nothing could surprise me out here. I had parked at the trailhead just before 7:30 in the morning. The parking lot was empty except for a few vehicles parked near the main entrance. I double-checked my pack, slung it over my shoulder, and stepped onto the trail. The sun was just beginning to pierce the canopy of oak and maple, golden light spilling through leaves, shadows moving with the morning wind. The air smelled like wet earth and pine needles, crisp and fresh, carrying the faint scent of smoke from some distant fire. The trail started with a gentle incline. Gravel and dirt crunched under my boots, and I fell into my usual rhythm, poles tapping in time with my steps. Birds called from high branches, and somewhere off to my left, a small stream babbled quietly. For the first hour, everything was as normal as it had always been. I walked, drank water, munched on a granola bar, and let my mind wander. I thought about work, the week ahead, the phone calls I would ignore for the next few hours. Then I noticed it, a rustle, faint, coming from just beyond the trees to my right. My first thought was deer, but the movement didn't match any animal I knew. It was deliberate, careful, patient. My chest tightened, a subtle warning creeping into my mind. I paused, listening. Branches snapped faintly under weight, too deliberate to be random. I continued walking, forcing my heartbeat to steady. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe it was nothing. But then I felt it. Eyes. Someone was watching me. The hair on my arms stood on end. I didn't want to turn, but my survival instincts screamed at me to know what was out there. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. Trees, shadows, and quiet. I kept moving, faster now, glancing behind me intermittently. That's when I saw him, or at least a shadow that should not have been there. A man, tall, dark clothes, hood pulled up, standing between the trees along the trail. He didn't move like a hiker. He didn't look like someone who was out for a walk. He watched me, patiently, intentionally. Fear surged through me, sharp and immediate. I told myself to stay calm. Panic was dangerous. Every story I had ever read about hikers gone missing involved someone who panicked, someone who didn't fight back. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I knew I had to move, but I couldn't just bolt blindly. Not yet. I shifted my weight and moved slowly to the side of the trail, pressing against the trees, trying to make myself less visible while calculating the best route forward. I could hear him now, faint footsteps synchronized with mine. He was following. He didn't need to hurry. He didn't need to reveal himself fully. He was patient. He knew I was alone. I reached into my pack and gripped the handle of my knife. A small comfort, but a reminder that I had to fight if he tried anything. My phone was in my pocket, but calling 911 on a trail miles from the road wasn't realistic. I had to rely on my own wits and strength. As the trail bent sharply around a ridge, I saw a small clearing ahead. I pushed toward it, hoping for a better vantage point. My boots slipped over wet leaves, my hands scratched by branches. The clearing was small, maybe 50 feet across, with rocks scattered along the edges. I crouched behind the largest boulder, breathing hard, scanning for the figure. He stepped into view, cautiously, not rushing, keeping hidden enough to remain unnoticed. My stomach turned. He had no pack, no obvious gear. This was no hiker. This was a predator. I waited, heart hammering, muscles tense. Every instinct screamed to run. But I knew one wrong move could make me vulnerable. I needed to fight if he tried to grab me. I recalled something I had read long ago. If someone attempts to abduct you, fight for your life no matter what. Weapons or no weapons, injuries or not, the moment you are pulled into a vehicle or taken out of sight is the moment you disappear. I moved deliberately, pretending to stretch my leg, trying to appear calm, trying to mask the fear surging through me. He didn't approach, not yet, but he stepped closer, careful, watching. My pulse was deafening. I could feel every beat through my chest and neck. I made a decision. Couldn't wait. I had to get off the trail and find open space. I picked a route leading slightly downhill to a creek crossing, thinking the noise of water might mask my movements. Branches scratched my arms and legs. My pack bounced painfully. I moved slowly at first, then faster until I was breaking into a run. He followed. Not sprinting, not recklessly, but keeping pace, calculated, patient. I stumbled over roots, fell onto my hands and knees once, scrambled upright, and didn't stop. Adrenaline made my lungs burn, my legs ache, but I ran until the forest opened slightly, giving me better visibility. I glanced over my shoulder. The man had not given up. He was following, silent but steady. My mind raced. If he caught me, the fight for survival would begin. I remembered the advice I had read repeatedly. Kick, claw, scream, bite. Whatever it takes to escape. Never go quietly. Never allow yourself to be moved without resistance. The trail led to a gravel service road that connected to the main highway. I pushed myself harder, the rough gravel tearing at the soles of my boots, my legs screaming, arms trembling from exertion. The man followed through the trees at the edge of the trail, still keeping some cover. I was so close to the road, so close to safety, that my chest tightened with a mix of fear and relief. I made it to the road and bolted into full daylight. The sudden openness made me feel exposed but safer. Cars passed occasionally, and I ran along the shoulder, hoping someone would notice me if anything happened. I didn't stop until I reached a farmhouse at the edge of the highway. I pounded on the door until someone answered, breathless, mud and scratches covering me. I didn't wait to explain. I just ran inside. The man had not pursued me beyond the trees. He had not followed into the open, but the memory of him, patient, watching, deliberate, stayed with me. Even days later, the fear did not fully leave. I reported the encounter to the local authorities, gave descriptions, trail locations, time estimates. They advised caution, and I never hiked alone again. I invested in safety gear, whistle, personal alarm, a small collapsible baton, and a GPS tracker. Every trail I took now came with backup plans, escape routes, and knowledge of nearby roads. That day, I realized the forest could be far more dangerous than any bear, cougar, or snake. A human predator doesn't roar, doesn't attack immediately, doesn't act on instinct alone. They watch, they wait, and they strike at the perfect moment. Almost getting kidnapped changed the way I moved in the woods forever. I understood that fight or flight had to be immediate, total, and fearless. No hesitation. No assumption that the forest itself protected you. Even now, when I hike, I never let myself feel fully alone. I plan every step, every exit, every route. And I remember that day, how close I came to being pulled out of sight, how fragile control can feel when someone is determined to take it from you. That day taught me that human patience and intent are more terrifying than anything else in the woods. And I survived because I understood one simple rule: fight for your life. Even if it hurts, even if it leaves scars, even if it risks injury, never allow yourself to be moved into darkness. Never allow yourself to disappear. I had always been drawn to the woods. Something about the quiet, the sense that the world shrank down to nothing but trees, rocks, and the path beneath your feet made me feel alive. Hiking had always been my escape. I could go for hours, sometimes all day, and leave the noise of the city, the endless emails, the phone buzzing, and the crowded streets far behind me. I liked the solitude, the rhythm of boots on dirt, the occasional call of a bird or the splash of a creek. I didn't expect that solitude to ever feel dangerous. I certainly didn't expect to nearly be kidnapped on a trail I thought I knew. And I certainly didn't expect that experience to teach me that human threats could make the wilderness scarier than any wild animal. The hike started out like any other. It was early October, and the air carried the sharp scent of pine needles mixed with fallen leaves. The sky was mostly clear, with a pale sun casting long shadows through the trees. I parked my car at the trailhead around 8:30 in the morning. The lot was nearly empty, just a few scattered cars of people who must have been planning longer hikes. I checked my backpack. Water, protein bars, a first aid kit, my phone, and a folding knife tucked into the side pocket more out of habit than expectation. I locked the car and took the dirt trail, boots crunching on loose gravel and dirt. For the first couple of hours, the hike was normal. I was climbing a series of rolling hills, patches of sunlight cutting through the forest canopy, small streams cutting across the trail. Every so often, I stopped to sip water, bite a granola bar, and look across the valley below. The trees here were tall and thick, mostly oak and maple, and the leaves were starting to turn, though green still dominated. I was alone, and I liked it that way. The forest felt safe. Bears were uncommon this time of year in this area, and I'd never seen a cougar. The only animals I spotted were birds flitting through the trees and the occasional squirrel darting across a fallen branch. The trail was well worn, but I liked the challenge it presented. Rocks jutting out, roots twisting across the dirt, occasional slick patches from early morning dew. It made me feel alert, alive. I reached a ridge line with a slight clearing, giving a view down into the valley. I stopped, leaning on my hiking poles, and took in the scenery. The sun was stronger now, piercing through the branches in golden beams. I could hear the distant hum of a highway miles away, faint but constant. I stretched my legs and took another sip of water before moving on. That's when I first noticed something unusual. A movement in the corner of my eye, just at the edge of the trees. I froze, squinting, scanning the brush. Nothing. Probably a deer, I told myself. Deer were common here. But then, the feeling of being watched crept in. A subtle sense, like a shadow lingering at the edge of your vision. Something that doesn't belong. I shook my head, trying to dismiss it, and kept moving. I told myself I was overthinking. Hikers sometimes get jumpy when alone. It was probably just the angle of the sun, a trick of the leaves, or my imagination. The trail twisted downhill, and I moved carefully, boots slipping slightly on damp soil. Then I heard it, a soft crunch of leaves behind me. At first, I thought it was a branch snapping under my own weight, but the sound repeated, rhythmically, just behind me. My stomach tightened. I paused, listening. Another step, a faint scrape of dirt, just far enough away that it could be anyone or no one. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing, just the familiar sweep of trees and the trail stretching behind me. I started walking again, but now every step, every sound, every crack of a branch made me flinch. I began to walk faster, testing my pace, trying not to panic. After about 10 minutes, I stopped again at another clearing, crouching behind a boulder to catch my breath. I peered around the edges, scanning the trees, the trail, the shadows. That's when I saw it. A figure standing upright, partially hidden behind a cluster of thin tree trunks. The movement was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to send my heart racing. My first instinct was to run, but I stayed frozen, trying to gather my thoughts. The figure stepped out slightly. I could see dark clothing, a hooded jacket, and boots. No pack, no obvious hiking gear, just standing there watching me. My pulse doubled. My throat went dry. I realized, with a jolt, that I wasn't just encountering a hiker. This person wasn't here for a walk. They were waiting, watching, patiently. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the figure, and moved toward the side of the trail where the forest was thicker. My mind raced. I thought of all the safety measures I should have taken but hadn't. Letting someone know exactly where I was, not hiking alone, carrying a whistle or pepper spray. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and acutely aware of how little control I had over this situation. The figure began moving along the trail in my direction. Not fast, but deliberate, keeping just far enough away to remain partly hidden. My stomach churned. Every instinct screamed to run, but I had to choose the right moment. Panic could make me stumble, make me vulnerable. I forced my legs to move, quickening my pace carefully, testing to see if they would follow. They did. I broke into a full run as soon as the trail opened slightly. Boots pounding dirt, heart hammering, lungs burning. I ran downhill through twists and turns, dodging roots and rocks. I could hear them behind me, following with a weight and purpose that made my blood run cold. Every snap of a twig, Every rustle of leaves became a warning. The trail split near a creek, and I veered toward the narrower side trail I remembered leading to the main road. Mud and water slowed my pace, but I couldn't afford to stop. The figure stayed behind, not gaining, not retreating, just keeping pace, patient, waiting for me to make a mistake. I stumbled over a root, almost face-planting into the dirt, but scrambled upright and kept moving. My hands and arms were scratched from branches. My pack shifted painfully against my back. Adrenaline coursed through me, making my muscles burn but keeping me moving. Finally, I reached the edge of the forest near the road. I glanced back. The trail looked empty. The figure had not emerged. Maybe they had given up. Maybe they were hiding, still waiting. I didn't stop to find out. I jogged carefully onto the road, keeping my phone in my hand. Once I reached the edge of the main highway, I ran the remaining distance to my car, parked in plain sight, heart still racing. I didn't look back until I was inside, locking the doors, checking the windows. I sat there for a long time, hands trembling on the steering wheel, heart slowing only gradually. I knew the person could have returned at any time. I knew that the forest, which I had always considered safe, could suddenly become a place where a human predator waited patiently. Driving home, I replayed every moment, every snap, every shadow, every step of the figure hidden in the trees. I realized then that almost getting kidnapped in the woods was far scarier than anything I had ever imagined encountering in nature. No bear, no cougar, no snake could be as calculating, as patient, as humanly terrifying as that experience. When I got home, I double-checked the locks, checked the doors, windows, and every corner of the yard. I sat in my room for hours, staring at the street outside, unable to shake the memory. Hiking had always been my escape, but now it carried a permanent caution. I would never walk the same trails alone again. The woods were no longer just peaceful. They were a place where danger could hide, where human patience could become terror. I never forgot it. Every step, every sound, every shadow was burned into my memory, and I knew, without a doubt, that the wilderness could be a far scarier place than any wild animal, because humans could wait, watch, and strike when you least expected it. I remember that night like it happened yesterday, even though it's been years. The air was crisp, the kind of late summer night that hints at the approaching fall, and the sky was clear, perfect for what we had planned. Four of us, myself, my best friend Mark, my friend Lily, and her brother Jake, decided it would be a great idea to hike to the top of a small mountain near town to watch a meteor shower. We were all 16 at the time, young, reckless, and thinking we were invincible, the kind of teenage confidence that never imagines danger beyond scraped knees or twisted ankles. We drove in Mark's dad's old pickup, the back seats loaded with water bottles, backpacks, and snacks. The parking area at the trailhead was nearly empty when we arrived. Most people our age were probably at parties or stuck inside playing video games. The trail itself was narrow, winding up through dense woods, with tall pines and maples crowding in on both sides. Moonlight filtered through the branches, throwing silver patterns on the dirt path. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every small sound, an animal rustling, leaves cracking, feel amplified. We started hiking, laughing and joking, talking about which constellations we could spot and how many meteors we hoped to see. About halfway up, we decided to take a break. I slumped against a tree, drinking water, trying to catch my breath after a particularly steep incline. That's when Lily squinted into the trees behind us and whispered, "Guys, do you see that?" I looked, and at first I didn't notice anything unusual, but then I did. A man was standing off the trail, a few dozen feet away, watching us. What made it worse, what made it completely unsettling, was his attire. A business suit, a full-on, dark suit, the kind you'd expect to see in an office downtown, not hiking a dirt trail in the middle of nowhere at night. His tie was neatly knotted, shoes polished, or at least they looked like they would be, if they weren't scuffed by dirt. "Probably just a lost hiker," Mark said, though even his voice carried unease. "Yeah, in a suit?" I muttered. I mean, really, it didn't make any sense. We waited for a minute, hoping he'd just move along. But he didn't. He started following us, keeping a distance, slow, measured steps that matched ours whenever we paused. Every time we looked back, he was there, shadowed in the moonlight, watching, waiting. We decided to keep moving, picking up our pace slightly. That's when he closed the distance. Within a few minutes, he was less than 10 feet away. Our hearts started pounding. That's when he spoke, calm, almost friendly in tone. "Hey, are you here for the meteor shower? Mind if I walk with you?" We froze. A man, at least in his 30s, wearing a suit, wanting to hike with 4 16-year-olds at night? It was wrong. It was instinctively, deeply wrong. But none of us knew what to do. Saying no seemed dangerous. Walking away could provoke him. Our teenage brains were scrambling for the right response. Sure," Mark said eventually, though his voice cracked slightly. We kept hiking, now acutely aware of every step he took. And that's when I noticed something even more disturbing. He was walking very close to Lily, almost brushing past her shoulder at times. His movements subtle but deliberate, as if he were trying to get a sense of her, to invade her space without drawing attention. I nudged Mark, whispering, "He's too close." Mark nodded, eyes wide. Lily didn't notice, or maybe she was too polite to call it out. My stomach churned. Something about this man felt predatory, calculated, the way a predator observes prey. We reached the top of the mountain. The clearing was small but offered a decent view of the night sky. Stars sparkled overhead, a few streaks of meteors already marking the sky. We sat down, trying to act normal to regain some composure. But he sat unusually close to Lily, almost pressing against her side. Her unease was palpable. You could see it in the way she shifted uncomfortably, her hands gripping her knees tightly. I realized we couldn't stay. Not like this. I leaned over to Lily, quietly suggesting we leave early. She nodded quickly, relief flashing across her face. We made excuses, saying we had to get back early, and we started descending, moving as fast as the steep, uneven trail would allow. At first, I thought we'd lost him. The trail twisted, shadows deepened, and the forest closed in. I glanced behind us. Nothing. I felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. When we reached a section near the bottom, I saw him, running, sprinting, and he wasn't just running. He was holding a large stick, arms pumping, intent clear in the way his eyes fixed on us. My heart slammed into my chest. Adrenaline overtook fear. We bolted down the trail, nearly tripping over roots and rocks, scrambling like our lives depended on it, because they did. The distance between us and the car felt endless. The forest blurred around me. The smell of damp earth, the scratch of branches on my arms, the crunch of gravel beneath our boots. Our lungs burned, legs trembling from exertion, hands gripping backpacks and poles, but we didn't stop. Not once. We reached the car and threw open the doors, slamming ourselves inside. Mark turned the key, tires spinning as we peeled out of the parking area. Even as we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The man was still sprinting toward us, stick raised, moving unnaturally fast for someone in dress shoes. Then, as the distance grew, he slowed, stopping at the edge of the tree line. But the terror of seeing him there, willing and able to pursue us, stayed with me. We didn't talk much on the drive home. No one needed to say anything. Silence carried the weight of what could have happened. When we finally got back to Mark's driveway, we collapsed into the front yard, hearts still hammering, trying to breathe, trying to convince ourselves it was over. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a message. One of Mark's cousins had sent a link to a news article. I froze, stomach dropping as I read. The same man in the suit. The article described how he had strangled his wife earlier that week, then later that night had attacked and killed another young girl on a hiking trail in the same area. The dates matched, the trail matched, the face, the same calm, calculated expression I'd seen in the moonlight, was unmistakable. I couldn't breathe for a moment. We had been mere minutes, mere feet from the same fate. The thought that he could have caught us, or that we might have been the ones to make the news, was almost too much to process. We never told our parents. We didn't go back. Not ever. The mountain, once a place of adventure and youthful excitement, became a symbol of danger, of the human capacity for evil. Over the years, I've learned a few things from that night. Trust your instincts. No casual explanation can excuse the unease you feel when something is off. And when you feel threatened, move, escape, and never assume someone's intentions are benign. That man could have been anyone. Charming, ordinary, unremarkable. But he had intent, and it almost cost us our lives. Even now, years later, when I hike, I plan my routes meticulously, tell someone where I am, carry safety tools, and never, ever underestimate the danger humans can pose, even in a place as seemingly peaceful as a quiet forest trail. That night taught me that while the wilderness holds risks, the most terrifying dangers are often not animals, not storms, not falls, they are people. And I survived. I grew up in a small town that most people wouldn't notice on a map. There wasn't much to it. A strip of shops along the main road, a few neighborhoods stretching toward the edges of town, and patches of woods that seemed endless if you wandered deep enough. For years, those woods had a reputation, one I'd learned about before I was even old enough to hike there on my own. My town had a serious meth problem. It wasn't just rumors or stories passed around at school. Everyone knew someone, or someone knew someone, involved. Dealers, users, hidden labs tucked in the thickest parts of the forest. At the time, those woods felt dangerous even in daylight, but at night they were almost mythical in their menace. By the time I was 16, things had started to calm down. The cops had busted several labs, caught the main dealers, and the constant paranoia in the woods had decreased. Still, the remnants were there. Old fire pits, discarded needles, beer cans, and the occasional plastic bag fluttering in a tree. You could smell it if you got close enough, the chemical tang of leftover meth ingredients or the faint stink of someone having been there recently. It left a taste in the air that made your stomach tighten. I knew enough to stay cautious, but the lure of the woods never left me. One Saturday morning, I decided to hike a section of forest near the outskirts of town I hadn't been to in a while. My pack was light. A water bottle, a couple of granola bars, a small first aid kit, and my phone. I didn't bother with a map. I knew the general layout from exploring over the years. Luna, my border collie, bounded ahead of me, tail high, ears alert. She'd grown up in the woods with me, and while she loved the freedom of open trails, she always stayed alert, nose twitching, body ready. The trail started off easy enough. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting shifting shadows on the dirt and fallen leaves. Birds called to each other, and the faint rustle of small animals in the underbrush reminded me the woods were alive. I let Luna off the leash once we were a few hundred meters in. She darted through the trees, returning every few minutes to check in, her eyes bright and aware. As we moved deeper, the air changed subtly. The familiar mix of pine, wet soil, and decaying leaves was joined by something acrid, a chemical tang that made my nose wrinkle. I froze mid-step, eyes scanning the underbrush. Luna stopped too, ears twitching, tail stiffening slightly. She didn't growl, but there was a tension in her posture I had learned to respect. I started paying closer attention. Old tire tracks carved into the dirt suggested recent vehicles had passed through. The occasional plastic container, torn open, hinted at someone having been there not long ago. This part of the woods had always been quiet, but the quiet now felt loaded, heavy with potential danger. I kept moving slowly, careful to avoid making noise. Luna stayed close, occasionally sniffing at an interesting scent, but always returning to my side. About half an hour in, I noticed something odd. A small clearing ahead had signs of recent activity. A thin trail of smoke curled faintly above a pile of discarded trash and what looked like the remnants of a makeshift fire. Empty cans and bottles were strewn about, and there was even a small cooler with remnants of ice still partially melted inside. My stomach dropped. The woods might have been less active since the busts, but clearly someone was still using them. I decided to backtrack slightly to see if I could get a better view without drawing attention. Luna pressed close, tail lowered, sensing my caution. I edged closer to the trees bordering the clearing, peering through branches. No one was visible at first. The smoke was faint, probably from early morning fire embers, but I could hear faint noises. The scraping of metal, the distant murmur of a voice, the occasional crunch of a footstep. My heart started pounding. I hadn't intended to come this close to anyone. One wrong step, one misjudged move, and I could be stumbling into someone dangerous. I remembered the stories I'd heard from older kids about encounters gone wrong. People hiding in the woods, wielding weapons, protecting their stash. The idea of being caught alone in that situation, with Luna as my only backup, made my hands clammy. I backed away slowly, scanning for paths to exit. That's when I saw movement. A figure stepping out of the brush, tall, hooded, carrying a long stick, maybe a branch, maybe something else. Luna growled, low and sharp, warning me to hold still. My instinct was to run, but I knew running could provoke the person. Instead, I froze, trying to stay calm, assessing the situation. The figure stepped closer, clearly aware of us. The stick was raised slightly, and I could see the glint of something metallic at the end. Maybe a knife, maybe just a piece of pipe. My mind raced. I thought about every escape plan I'd ever considered, every trick to stay safe in the woods. Slowly, carefully, I started moving laterally, keeping the trees between us as cover, trying to put distance between me and whoever it was. The figure mirrored me, not rushing, but deliberate, confident. Luna barked once sharply, and I tensed. The figure stopped, cocked their head, and for a moment, everything froze. I could feel the weight of the woods pressing in, the quiet, the smell of smoke, the sound of my own breathing, and I realized that one wrong move could end badly. I spotted a slight incline leading to a thicker part of the forest, where I could duck out of sight. I urged Luna to follow quietly, patting her back and whispering, "Come on, girl," slow and steady. She obeyed, low to the ground, scanning constantly, body coiled with alertness. The figure didn't follow immediately, which gave me a chance to move. I kept my back to trees, every step careful, feet making minimal sound. Luna stayed behind me, muscles tight, ready to react. I could feel her tension, and that tension heightened my own. She knew danger instinctively, and I trusted her sense far more than I trusted my own eyes at that moment. We reached the thicker part of the forest and slowed down. The figure was gone, at least from sight. I crouched behind a large pine, chest heaving, trying to calm myself. Luna licked my hand once, eyes bright, signaling that we were okay for the moment, but not safe yet. I scanned the surrounding area, noting potential escape routes, places to put distance between us and the clearing. I realized then how lucky we were. The bus years earlier had reduced activity, but remnants and individuals like this still existed. The woods were quieter now, yes, but danger lingered in patches, especially around forgotten clearings and abandoned properties. I knew better than to approach those areas, but my curiosity, like that of so many hikers, had almost put me in harm's way. We stayed low for a while, moving only when it was safe, until I finally found a trail leading out of the dense forest. Luna stayed close, tail low, ears twitching constantly. As we emerged, the smell of smoke faded, replaced by the fresh scent of pine and earth. I let her off leash briefly, allowing her to run in open space while keeping my eyes on the woods behind us. By the time we reached my car, I was trembling, exhaustion mixing with adrenaline. Luna jumped in beside me, panting, tail wagging slightly, as if to say, "We made it." I sat there for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. I thought about how close we had come to a potentially deadly encounter, how easily curiosity could have turned into tragedy. Driving home, I reflected on what I had learned. The woods were no longer the chaotic, dangerous place they had been years ago, but remnants of the past lingered. Meth labs were gone, major dealers were caught, but individuals still operated in pockets. Awareness, caution, and respect for the environment, and for your own instincts, were critical. I realized I would never again wander into a clearing without assessing it thoroughly first, never again underestimate the quiet patches of danger hidden among trees. Luna nudged my hand as we turned into the driveway, reminding me that while the woods could be unpredictable, having a companion with instinct and loyalty made all the difference. That morning's hike taught me that the forest might look calm and safe on the surface, but danger can linger quietly, waiting for a momentary lapse in awareness. And when it comes to survival, experience, instinct, and careful planning outweigh curiosity every time. We survived that hike, unscathed but aware. I never returned to that particular section again, and I carried the lesson with me on every trek afterward. The past leaves its mark, even on seemingly peaceful woods, and respecting it, and the creatures you hike with, can save your life. I had been staring at my phone for nearly an hour, trying to kill time before bed, when I noticed the clock had flipped to midnight. Normally, I would have put it down hours ago, but something about scrolling through hiking forums and reading personal trail stories had me hooked. I knew better, but the pull of reading real experiences, unfiltered and raw, was impossible to resist. Holy shit, why am I reading this at midnight? I muttered to myself, my eyes widening as I clicked on yet another post. A first-person account of a solo hike gone wrong deep in the backcountry. The kind of story that made you question every noise in the dark, every shadow cast by a streetlight, every rustle in the yard. I didn't put the phone down. My room felt unusually cold, though the heat was on, and every sound outside my window, the distant hum of traffic, a stray dog barking, leaves brushing against the wall, made me flinch. I tried to tell myself it was just the story doing its job, making the familiar world feel strange and threatening. But my mind started wandering, replaying every hike I had taken over the past few years. I thought of the narrow trails flanked by cliffs, the dark forest at dusk, the quiet, oppressive feeling when you're completely alone and far from anyone else. By the time I realized how late it was, I had a strange urge to go outside, to walk the nearby trails behind my house. It was stupid. I lived in a suburban area, not a forest, but I needed the fresh air, needed to shake the claustrophobic sensation that had settled over me. I grabbed my backpack, tossed in a flashlight, a water bottle, my phone, and a small first aid kit, then stepped outside. The air was crisp and cool, heavy with the smell of wet earth and cut grass. The moon was hidden behind clouds, casting a dim, silvery glow over the quiet neighborhood. My pulse quickened, partly from the chill and partly from the sense that I was doing something I shouldn't. The trail behind my house started innocuously enough. It was a dirt path that ran along the edge of the woods, separating our neighborhood from an abandoned park. Broken branches and scattered leaves crunched under my boots. At first, it felt familiar, comforting even, until I noticed how silent it was. No frogs croaking, no owls calling, no rustle of nocturnal animals. Just the sound of my own footsteps and the occasional snap of a twig. The deeper I went, the narrower and rougher the path became, lined with overgrown bushes and low-hanging branches that scratched at my arms. I remembered the story I had just read and felt my heart rate pick up. Every detail from that post, twigs snapping behind a hiker, shadows moving in the corner of the eye, was now vivid in my mind. I had been walking for what felt like 20 minutes when I noticed the first oddity. A pile of debris, mostly branches and leaves, had been stacked neatly just off the trail. At first, I thought it was from a storm, but the arrangement was too deliberate, too organized to be random. Someone had taken the time to collect it and stack it. My hand instinctively went to the flashlight illuminating the pile. The shadows it cast were long and distorted, making the branches look like hands reaching out. I shivered and moved past it, telling myself it was just leftover park maintenance, but my instincts told me to stay alert. I kept walking deeper into the woods. The trail narrowed further, roots and rocks jutting out unpredictably. The forest floor was damp, the smell of decay sharp and penetrating. Every step seemed louder than the last, amplified by the surrounding silence. My mind started playing tricks, making me think I heard movement just behind me, twigs snapping or leaves rustling. Each time I paused and shone my flashlight behind me, there was nothing. Yet the feeling remained, an awareness of being watched, even if no one was actually there. After what felt like an eternity, I reached a small clearing. The moonlight filtered through the canopy, revealing a patch of soft grass surrounded by thick trees. I took a moment to catch my breath and look around, and that's when I noticed another pile. This one was larger, composed of thick branches and logs, stacked carefully in the center of the clearing. Someone had taken time to make it stable, almost like a marker. My skin prickled as I circled it with my flashlight, trying to make sense of it. There were no footprints in the soft soil, no signs of a campsite, no other disturbances. Just the pile, deliberate and isolated. I moved on, forcing myself to keep walking, though my sense of unease was growing. The trail curved sharply and descended toward a creek. The sound of water was comforting at first, but soon it became a low, constant hum that seemed to amplify the forest's other noises. The crunch of leaves, the occasional snap of a branch. I kept telling myself it was just the forest reacting to my presence. But the thought was hollow. Something about the way the piles were spaced, the quiet of the night, and the fact that I was alone deepened the tension in my chest. Hours seemed to pass as I continued. The forest darkened further, shadows merging into one another, shapes in the periphery of my vision stretching and contracting unnaturally. My flashlight beam caught glimpses of branches, leaves, and more piles of debris arranged carefully off the trail. Some were half hidden, others fully exposed. I tried to rationalize it, volunteers clearing trails, hikers marking paths, but the number and placement of the piles made no sense. They seemed almost like breadcrumbs leading somewhere, though to where I could not tell. My stomach churned. Eventually, I reached the largest pile I had seen yet. It was massive, easily 6 feet wide and 5 feet tall, built with logs, branches, and debris. At the top were small scraps of fabric tangled in the branches. I leaned closer, shining the flashlight directly on it, and could see what looked like part of a glove or a torn sock. I froze. Nothing about it screamed supernatural, but the implication that someone had been here recently, left these markers, and had been meticulous in arranging them made the hair on my arms stand on end. I stepped back slowly, my senses heightened, every sound amplified in the oppressive silence. By this point, the trail had become difficult to follow. The creek curved and split around fallen logs, the path weaving between trees and patches of brush. My mind was focused solely on navigation, flashlight sweeping the ground and surrounding trees. Twigs snapped behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing. A rustle in the leaves made me freeze again, convinced I had seen a shadow move. My pulse raced. I realized I had ventured far enough that turning back was now the safest option. The return trip was tense and exhausting. I kept my flashlight ready, sweeping the beam from side to side, watching for any movement. The piles of wood appeared again, smaller now, but placed close to the trail as though someone had been monitoring it. Each one reinforced my unease. I moved faster, careful not to trip over roots or rocks, and the forest seemed to close in around me, thick and impenetrable. My ears were on high alert, every noise amplified, the hum of insects, the water flowing, leaves brushing against each other. I felt an almost constant presence just beyond the light's reach. Finally, I emerged from the dense forest, the trail opening into the familiar suburban park near my house. The piles were gone now, replaced by the normal detritus of a maintained park. Scattered leaves, broken branches, and the occasional discarded trash. Relief washed over me as I left the trail and reached the street. My breath slowed, heart rate gradually returning to normal. I carried the tension with me for hours, replaying every pile, every shadow, every noise. Even in the safety of my home, I could feel the forest lingering in my mind, a reminder of how isolated and meticulous human presence can feel in the wilderness. Since that night, I have avoided reading hiking stories at midnight. The forest can feel empty and inviting, yet it is never truly empty. Someone may have been there before you, leaving traces you can't fully explain. Even now, when I see a neatly stacked pile of branches or logs, I think of that night, the darkness, the shadows, the careful arrangement of debris, and I remember that some places are better appreciated from a distance. It's a lesson in awareness, in respect for the unknown human activity that can make an otherwise peaceful trail feel impossibly tense. That night taught me to pay attention, to leave the forest alone, and to trust my instincts, because the quietest trails can hide the most deliberate human presence. and it's always safer to assume someone has been there before you.